If star safety KJ Winston misses time, Tom Allen's going to make this obvious change to the defense that some Penn State fans are going to really like.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now, it's going to be a different look for this defense, but it is a familiar one. Another true freshman is set to burn his red shirt, and there might be a position battle that we're not really talking about enough on the offensive line. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5. $5, and you'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And that date is quickly approaching. I'd appreciate it if you left a like on this episode, but more importantly, be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. Let me know your thoughts about this defensive change that is on the way. And that's where we will begin this show with Tom Allen's defense going back to not the 4-2-5, but a 4-3 base defensive look. That's on the way if KJ Winston does in fact miss some time, whether that's 1 game, 2 games, and hopefully not 3 or more games. We don't know what kind of injury he is dealing with, but if KJ Winston does in fact miss time, Penn State will return to a 4-3 base look and play 3 linebackers as tradition and 2 safeties. Now, this might be a big deal for some people because this is Penn State's linebacker U. And some people have argued that the 4-2-5 hasn't been a great defensive change, that the personnel doesn't align with what Penn State needs to be doing. And that's fine. I understand that the tape kind of goes against that argument with the Bowling Green game. But schematically, this is a change, but not a whole lot is going to change overall. You will see more of Tony Rojas, Kobe King, and Dom DeLuca on the field out there first, with Jalen Reed and Zach Wheatley as that 2 safety look. Tyler Elsdon is going to factor in quite a bit as that veteran backup. And then whether we see Anthony Specca or Kari Jackson is left to be seen. Now against Kent State, that could be an initiative that they get on the football field to get some more playing time, to get that experience. And Keon Wiley, hopefully he comes back sooner rather than later, because when you're using 3 linebackers at a time, you're going to need some more depth. And the reason for Penn State switching back to a 4-3 if KJ Winston does in fact miss an extended period of time is because Penn State is going to trust Dom DeLuca more than the 4th safety that they have, and that's true freshman Dejon Lane. Now, we'll talk about Lane more in the upcoming segment, and it's no disrespect. I mean that. No disrespect at all with Penn State's preference to play Dom DeLuca as that 3rd linebacker as opposed to Lane as that 3rd safety. Again, I'll have more on Lane in just a moment, and good things about Lane too. But again, some things will change schematically in terms of how they approach this 4-3 defensive look, but it really isn't an overhaul, because Penn State running that 4-2-5 base defense, KJ Winston is essentially that 3rd linebacker. He is a safety, but he plays run defense so well, very, very well. And arguably, I don't even think you can make an argument here. This is a fact that he is better in run defense than all the other linebackers. That is not a hot take. He has a 90.7 run defense grade, according to Pro Football Focus. Over 90. That is elite tier. That's top in the country. The next best in run defense for linebackers is Tyler Elsdon at 67.8. So we're looking at this, okay, wow, that's really great for KJ Winston. Oh, that's kind of a shocker from the linebacker group. Essentially, he is that 3rd linebacker here. He's also the best overall tackler. He has not missed a tackle to this day in college football. Seriously, I am describing a linebacker here. KJ Winston just happens to be a safety. But it's also fair to acknowledge that Winston and DeLuca are much different players because of their abilities and skill sets. Look, Winston is the better overall player. Again, that is not a hot take. This is why he is viewed as a potential first-round pick, why he was considered a preseason All-America candidate. Winston is as great as advertised here, but Dom DeLuca is a two-time captain. He is that next linebacker in the rotation, even though Tony Rojas and Kobe King have been the starters in the 4-2-5. DeLuca still offers a lot, from whether it's for his support in run defense, and people might criticize him in the run, but he is still able to take on bigger blockers and disrupt plays since he is a bigger overall player. He has a bigger body, and he's still one of the smartest players on the team. So if you want to criticize Dom DeLuca because he might not be the fastest or something like that, he makes up for it with how he studies the game and his X's and O's. He knows where to be in most situations. I think some of the criticism for DeLuca is a little unfair because he's graded out pretty well despite some of the criticism there. So if KJ Winston does in fact miss time, you can expect a 4-3 defensive look with Jalen Reed and Zach Wheatley as the safeties, and then the three starting linebackers will be Tony Rojas as that weak side linebacker, Kobe King as the mic. He's still going to get the play calls in with literally the mic in his headset, the mic linebacker with the mic, and then Dom DeLuca is going to be your strong side linebacker returning to tradition with that 4-3 defensive look. And that's because Penn State needs to get more experience for the true freshman players. One of them is now set to be a green light and burn his red shirt. Dejan Lane is already in that category. I'll tell you about the fellow true freshman that now joins Lane and Cooper Cousins with the intention to burn his red shirt and why that's important on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by one of our new sponsors on the show, and that is Roy. Nittany Lion fans, have you heard about Roy? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fan, get involved with NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you now have the power to help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. And as we all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. Roy changes the NIL game for fans. And I know what the concern might be here is the risk with these contributions. Well, with Roy, there are no risks for your contributions. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan's support. If not, then the money is returned to the fan. You can engage with athletes on their NIL journey. By using Roy, fans not only support athletes financially, but also become a part of their name, image, and likeness journey, helping them succeed both on and off the field. You can get the Roy app from iOS and Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. And you can use this referral code Locked On for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash in a sweepstakes. All you got to do, just go, if you have any other. For more details, visit joinroy.com. That's joinroy.com for more details. There's no purchase necessary and void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game with Roy. Support the players, change the game with Roy. Yesterday, during his press conference, James Franklin announced that Luke Reynolds has officially been green-lit. He has the green light, and there is going to be a plan in place to burn his red shirt and play more than 4 games. For the true freshman tight end, Luke Reynolds, this is really, I mean really impressive here. Now, granted, the expectations are high, 5-star prospect, but he's meeting them. He is meeting them. Tight end is, and the reason for this is because tight end is one of the most difficult positions to adjust to at the college level. You go from, James Franklin has pointed this out, you go from at 16, 17 years old, blocking players who are roughly 220 pounds at defensive end, because you're tight end, you are on the edge of the line of scrimmage, and that's usually who you're going up against, or a 200-pound linebacker, right? But then you go from that to potentially blocking somebody who's 250, 260 pounds, maybe even larger than that. Denai Dennis Sutton weighs over 260 pounds. So if you're Luke Reynolds, you're going from blocking someone who's 210, 220 to potentially 260, and not a lot of players are able to make that jump in year run. For the most part, 99% of tight ends need that adjustment period, need that redshirt season, but not Luke Reynolds. not Luke Reynolds in this case. Now, the move is also justified by Luke Reynolds' ability, his actual ability and upside, but also depth chart availability. Partially because Khalil Dinkins has been unavailable, which is why Luke Reynolds played a little bit against West Virginia and a little bit against Bowling Green. And now Andrew Rapplier's extended unavailability with what's been described as a long-term injury. So we know that Andrew Rapplier is not out for the season, but he's going to miss an extended period of time. There's no speculation about that. But in combination with that, Luke Reynolds is having his red shirt burned because he is just that good. Because Penn State has, did we not forget, Joey Schlaffer was in that class with Andrew Rapplier and was a top 10 tight end in the class of 2023 overall in the nation. Jerry Cross was a former top 10 tight end in the class of 2022. So it's not that Penn State doesn't have the available depth. Joey Schlaffer or Jerry Cross could easily be that next man up in this conversation if Dinkins was unavailable. Now we know that Rapplier is unavailable, so now why not turn to Schlaffer and Cross? Because Reynolds has ascended past both of them. Reynolds, as a true freshman, Schlaffer in year 2, Cross in year 3, why not them? Because Reynolds offers more upside and has now surpassed them on the depth chart, and that's the benefit of enrolling early. And of course, being as talented as it is this early in his career, Tyler Warren has spoken very, very highly of him. So that's your 3 deep depth chart at tight end. If everything goes well moving forward, Tyler Warren is your starter, your clear-cut number 1 tight end, Khalil Dinkins as the number 2, Luke Reynolds as a number 3 who is going to see playing time now as that 3rd tight end, and possibly as he continues to get better down the season, might even be that number 2 tight end with Khalil Dinkins, again, depending on how much he gets better over the course of the season. But that is the expectation, that Reynolds is going to continue to make this jump as a true freshman and be a key contributor in a backup role, but a key contributor down the stretch of the season. Now, somebody else that had the plan there was Cooper Cousins on offensive line. Hey, he has the green light. He is not going to have a redshirt season. Dejon Lane at safety, surprisingly, was in that conversation early in the season. So now Reynolds joins this exclusive club here of Cooper Cousins and Dejon Lane. Dejon Lane was really surprising, in my opinion, because he was not an early enrollee. He did not enroll for the spring football season and joined over the course of the summer. And it was initially rumored that, okay, he's a safety, but he's possibly going to make the move to linebacker in his career. And maybe he does at some point. There's no intel to say one way or another. But Penn State, I would say there's more intel against him moving to linebacker at this point because they have viewed him, just haven't had the need to play him as that 4th safety. He is currently the 4th safety behind KJ Winston, Jalen Reed, and Zach Seyko. And now that KJ Winston unfortunately might not be available, Dejon Lane immediately is thrusted into that key contribution role as a backup, and that's why, again, they're going to go away from the 4-2-5 to the 4-3 defense, but they can still run elements of the 4-2-5 because they do believe in Dejon Lane. And even if they do go to a 4-3, I'm sure that he would allow a Zach Seyko or a Jalen Reed just a couple plays off to catch their breath, right? Get some rest on the sideline. That's what they think of Dejon Lane, as someone who didn't enroll early, but can play this early in his Penn State career as a true freshman. Now, this is strictly from the word of the coaching staff. They see how good he is in practice and scout team and everything. Well, he's not on scout team, but they see him in practices going up against his fellow teammates. We as Penn State spectators don't know for sure exactly how good he is yet because he hasn't played a ton. He's played on special teams a little bit, but he hasn't played an active amount of defensive snaps. Now, James Franklin said in his press conference yesterday that there is an initiative to get him prepared because they definitely need him now. And James Franklin also said that they wanted to get him in the game against Bowling Green, but the opportunity didn't exactly present itself because it was a closer game than anticipated here. So if Winston misses an extended period of time, Lane will play more, but Penn State's still going to opt for the traditional 4-3 defensive look. But both things can be true. Penn State's going to have more of a cycle of its defenses and how it's going to look in terms of personnel. They're going to opt for the 4-3 base, Lane will still play more and get acclimated and thank goodness that Penn State is playing Kent State at this point in time before they get to Illinois, before they get to UCLA. And speaking of Illinois, that is a primetime match at 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. I know they won't pick a time, but that's a top 25 showdown if with Illinois coming into town at Beaver Stadium. I'm optimistic for Lane here. I'm optimistic for him because the coaches have praised him since the season started. James said that he wishes that Lane had enrolled early because then he would have been further ahead and probably playing more in those first two games against West Virginia and Bowling Green. However, the past is the past. They're working hard to have him prepared to play a bigger role, contributing as a rotational safety in some regard. We'll see how much that is at the end of the day. We'll see him quite a bit against Kent State. And depending on KJ Winston's availability, Lane's going to have to be ready to go against an Illinois, maybe a UCLA. Hopefully not as much. Hopefully Winston is back in time for the USC game. But if Lane's adjusted, then he can play snaps against USC as well if Penn State's defense and coaching staff do trust him that much to go up against USC when that game actually rolls around. We'll flip it back over to the offense to finish up the show because there is potentially a position battle here that not enough people have talked about to this point after the Bowling Green game. We'll discuss that more in depth on the other side of this break. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and you'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. And all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time, so there's no obligation. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. And if you look over at FanDuel.com right now, you can see the lines posted for Penn State versus Kent State. It opened at minus 48.5 for Penn State as a favorite on the spread, but now there's been some line movement. Penn State is now a minus 49.5 on the spread favorite, and the total is set at 55.5. There's no money line on this one, but if you like any of those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The possible position battle that I'm referring to is on the offensive line, and it's over at the left tackle spot. Drew Shelton versus Nolan Rucci. For anybody that might have missed this, it's something that I think has been overlooked. Drew Shelton was taken out at left tackle, and Nolan Rucci went in and played for a good portion of the game against Bowling Green. Shelton was bad against Bowling Green. The eye test shows it. You look at Pro Football Focus, the analytics, the grades are not good. They are not flattering. Shelton was also not that good against West Virginia either. Pass blocking, he was solid. Run blocking was another story. It was poor, and PFF backs it up. And then everything kind of broke down against Bowling Green, neither side of it. Pass blocking, run blocking, it was a mess for Drew Shelton. And then Rucci went in and he played better, but it wasn't a whole lot better. Don't think that there was this large gap in terms of overall performance from Shelton to Rucci. So there are question marks here. Who is going to be the starting left tackle moving forward? Is there going to be a rotation at left tackle, which I don't agree with? Now, this is why Nolan Rucci was brought in. I moved closer to home. He's from Pennsylvania, right? But in terms of what Penn State football needs from Nolan Rucci, not the other way around. Nolan Rucci needs specific things from Penn State football. But Penn State football needed Nolan Rucci for depth, but also to be able to compete for starting spots. Anthony Donko wasn't a sure thing at right tackle. And I talked about at the beginning of the season and over the summer that Drew Shelton, I didn't think he was a sure thing at left tackle. And that's starting to come true here. When we actually talked to Nolan Rucci's former head high school coach over at Warwick High School, Bob Locker. And Coach Locker said that Rucci can play both tackle spots, can play both sides, despite playing mostly at right tackle when he was at Wisconsin. Keep an eye on this. This is a big deal moving forward for a variety of reasons. You cannot have a revolving door at left tackle. You don't just have a timeshare for protecting the blind side of Drew Aller. And that's because you don't want to have a breakdown in chemistry. Left tackle and center are arguably the most important spots on the offensive line, or right tackle, depending on if you have a left-handed quarterback, but typically quarterbacks are right-handed, of course. So the blind side protector of Drew Aller, this being a toss-up going into the middle of the season here, is not ideal for Penn State, especially with Big Ten competition looming. Ohio State and USC are one thing. They would take advantage of that if that's a weakness for Penn State. But even Illinois, who's now in the top 25, Wisconsin has a top 10 defense. I know offensively they're abysmal, but Wisconsin can still pose threats defensively. Minnesota, Washington, it doesn't matter. Big Ten conference type of competition will make Penn State pay if they don't have the left tackle spot anchored down. Having solid ability is one part of this. You have to be able to do your job. But rotating in at left tackle like this, or rotating in any offensive lineman, you don't want to have a breakdown in chemistry, communication, symmetry. The offensive line needs to be in sync. They need to be able to create a pocket. If they're running a zone, they need to be able to time and work up to the second level, right? Just some small football nuances here that matter when you make a position change like this. If you make the change, you're going to have to stick with that change. There's no going back. It's like, oh, well, Nolan Rucci will play him 1 week. Drew Shelton will play him another week. That's not how this works here. This has to be solved by the end of Kent State. And fortunately, you can get a better idea in a not consequential type of game with Kent State, because they're not going to offer that sort of resistance. But you play Nolan Rucci, you play Drew Shelton, you see which of the two is better, and that's it. You don't get to make this decision going up against Illinois, UCLA. You have to make this decision now. So this is it. You get one game to figure it out. Illinois is on the horizon. They could potentially be a top 25 team depending on what happens with this weekend's game against Nebraska. I know Kent State won't be the best competition to get an understanding of what's going on, but that's also what practice is for. But this is the deadline. It's either Drew Shelton or Nolan Rucci. You don't get a chance to say, well, we'll decide after Illinois. Well, we'll decide after UCLA. That's not how it's going to work here, because left tackle is so important as the blindside protector of whoever's back there. It doesn't even matter if it's Drew Aller. Bo Prabula is a right-handed quarterback. Ethan Grunkemeyer is a right-handed quarterback. You need to figure this out now while you have an opportunity against Kent State, because you can't do the same type of thing against an Illinois, even a UCLA, and definitely not against USC or Ohio State. And that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Please leave a like on this show, share it with friends and family. More importantly, be a part of the comment section, be a part of the discussion, and let me know your thoughts about the return of the 4-3 defensive look, Luke Reynolds getting the green light at tight end, and what could be a question mark at left tackle with Nolan Rucci and Drew Shelton over there, who you think should be the starter moving forward. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Football with host Spencer McLaughlin as he recaps the weekend before, talks about the news and analysis leading up to that next weekend slate of games, and previews all of it. There is no stone that is not turned over when it comes to college football with Spencer, and that's why it's called Locked On College Football. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.